In 1845, two British ships sailed into the Arctic with one of the most ambitious goals in the history of exploration: to find the Northwest Passage, the long-sought route connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans through the frozen islands of the far north. HMS Erebus and HMS Terror were wooden vessels built to withstand extreme conditions. Before their final voyage, their hulls were reinforced, internal heating systems were installed, and both ships were fitted with auxiliary steam engines. They carried years of provisions, scientific instruments, books, maps, and some of the most advanced technology available to the British Navy at the time. This was not supposed to be a reckless adventure. It was presented as a carefully planned scientific expedition, commanded by experienced officers and supported by the power of the British Empire. The expedition was led by Sir John Franklin, one of Britain's best-known Arctic explorers. Francis Crozier commanded HMS Terror, while James Fitzjames was one of the senior officers aboard HMS Erebus. On May 19, 1845, the expedition departed from Greenhithe with 134 men. After stopping in Greenland, 5 men were sent home, leaving 129 officers and crew members to continue north. The first letters were confident. The ships were strong. The supplies appeared sufficient. The men expected the voyage to end in discovery and glory. In late July, whaling ships saw Erebus and Terror in Baffin Bay, waiting for an opening in the ice. It was the last confirmed sighting of the entire expedition while its men were still alive. After that, both ships disappeared. No new letters arrived, no distress signal was received, no ship returned, and not one of the 129 men reached home to explain what had happened. The expedition spent its first winter at Beechey Island. It then continued south toward the waters surrounding King William Island, still searching for a route through the Arctic. But in September 1846, the sea froze around the two ships. Arctic ice is never truly still. It moves, piles up, and presses against a ship's wooden hull from every direction. A passage that is open one day can become an endless wall of ice the next. One winter passed, then a summer failed to release the ships, then another winter began. Inside the wooden corridors, the men waited for the sound of breaking ice that might signal their escape. Instead, they faced illness, exhaustion, isolation, and a growing shortage of fresh food. On June 11, 1847, Sir John Franklin died. The men may have believed that the worst had already happened, but the death of their commander was not the end of the disaster. It was the beginning of the final chapter, in which the fate of 129 men vanished into the ice. A few weeks before Franklin's death, a written message had been placed inside a stone cairn at Victory Point. The original note was calm and reassuring. It stated that the expedition had spent its first winter at Beechey Island and that the ships were trapped in the ice. It ended with a brief statement: "All well." Less than a year later, men from the expedition returned to the same document and added a very different message around its margins. The ships had remained trapped since September 1846. Sir John Franklin was dead. 24 officers and men had already died. And on April 22, 1848, Erebus and Terror had been abandoned. 105 men were still alive, led by Francis Crozier and James Fitzjames. They left the ships and stepped onto the frozen sea, carrying whatever supplies they could and dragging heavily loaded boats across the ice on wooden sledges. Their plan was to travel south toward the Back River, where they might find food, hunting grounds, or a route to safety. But the journey became a slow race against death. The distance was enormous. The weather was merciless. The men were already weakened by 2 years of isolation, sickness, and poor nutrition, and the boats they dragged across the broken ice may have become almost impossible burdens. From this point onward, no British written record explains what happened day by day. Only scattered evidence remained: an abandoned boat on a sledge, books, clothing, tools, silverware, campsites, graves, and human remains spread along the route toward the south. and there were the accounts preserved by the Inuit. Local witnesses described seeing a group of white men walking along the western coast of King William Island. The men appeared exhausted and were dragging a boat. Later accounts spoke of bodies found farther south near the Back River and of survivors who had reached the final stages of starvation. In 1854, explorer John Ray collected these testimonies. He also obtained silverware and personal objects from the Inuit, some of them marked with the names of Franklin's officers. His report suggested that some of the last survivors may eventually have consumed the remains of the dead. Victorian Britain reacted with outrage. Many refused to believe that officers and sailors of the Royal Navy could have ended in such a desperate condition. Inuit testimony was dismissed, and John Ray was attacked publicly. But later, evidence changed the debate. Researchers discovered cut marks on human bones found along the expedition's final route. In 2024, similar evidence was identified on the jawbone of James Fitzjames after his remains were confirmed through DNA analysis. This evidence cannot tell us who did what or exactly how each man died, but it confirms that starvation reached a point where rank, discipline, and social rules could no longer protect the dead. No one survived the march south. Yet an even larger mystery remained. If the men abandoned Erebus and Terror in April 1848, how did the ships later reach locations far from the place where they had been trapped? Did some of the survivors return? Did one of the ships sail again? And where did the vessels finally come to rest? When the expedition failed to return, Britain began sending rescue missions into the Arctic. The search eventually became one of the largest operations of the 19th century. Dozens of expeditions examined islands, coastlines, and frozen channels. Each returned with another fragment of the story, but not with the complete truth. At Beechey Island, searchers found the remains of the expedition's first winter camp and the graves of men who had died early in the voyage. Elsewhere, they discovered books, clothing, equipment, and pieces of boats. But Erebus and Terror remained missing. In 1859, Lieutenant William Hobson reached the stone cairn at Victory Point and found the document containing both messages. It became the expedition's only official written record explaining Franklin's death, the number of casualties, the abandonment of the ships, and the survivors' decision to march south. Francis McClintock's expedition also found a heavy boat resting on a sledge, still filled with personal possessions. The discovery was disturbing. The men had been fighting for survival, yet they were dragging objects that may already have become useless against hunger and cold. For generations, the fate of the two ships remained a matter of speculation. Had they been crushed by the ice? Had they sunk immediately? Had some survivors returned to them? Or had the drifting ice carried the abandoned ships away? For years, many searches relied primarily on European maps and assumptions. But Inuit communities had preserved accounts of ships, wreckage, objects, and locations that did not always match the traditional search areas. In the 21st century, this knowledge was combined with modern mapping, sonar, and underwater vehicles. On September 1st, 2014, a team working on land discovered an iron fitting and a piece of wood connected to a ship from Franklin's expedition. The search area was changed. The following day, sonar revealed the shape of a nearly complete ship resting on the seafloor. It was HMS Erebus. 2 years later, information provided by Sammy Kogvik of Joa Haven led searchers into Terror Bay. Sonar passed over a clear shipwreck. It was HMS Terror. The vessel was preserved in extraordinary condition. Its rudder, passageways, officers' cabins, shelves, plates, bottles, and parts of the captain's cabin remained protected by cold water and sediment. But finding both ships did not close the investigation. Erebus was discovered far south of the original trapping location. Terror was found inside a bay, far from Victory Point. This suggests several possibilities. Some of the men may have returned to the ships, they may have attempted to sail again, and documents may still remain sealed inside the wrecks, waiting to reveal the final days of the expedition. Science is also beginning to return names to men who remained unidentified for more than a century and a half. In 2021, DNA analysis identified John Gregory, an engineer aboard Erebus. In 2024, researchers identified James Fitzjames, one of the senior officers who signed the final addition to the Victory Point note. In 2026, 4 more members of the expedition were identified: Harry Pegler, William Wensall Oren, David Young, and John Bridgens. Only 6 names restored through DNA out of 129 men. Today, we know when the ships became trapped. We know when Franklin died. We know that 24 men died before the vessels were abandoned. And we know that 105 survivors stepped onto the ice in April 1848. But we still do not know the exact order of the final events. We do not know how many men returned to the ships. We do not know whether either vessel sailed again. We do not know who remained alive until the very end. And we do not know whether a journal or final written message is still hidden inside Erebus or Terror. The Franklin expedition was more than a failed attempt to cross the Arctic. It was a confrontation between an empire that trusted its ships, technology, and supplies, and an environment that obeyed no map and no command. It was also a story of knowledge ignored for far too long. The Inuit accounts that were dismissed in the 19th century later became essential to understanding the disaster and locating the 2 ships. Perhaps we will never know everything that happened on the ice. But every document, every artifact, every image from the seafloor, and every DNA result restores another part of the truth. This was Yusuf from ATHAR. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and tell us in the comments which historical mystery you want us to investigate next. We will meet again in a new investigation, following the evidence until we get closer to the truth.